Imagine a journey back in time, about 68 million years ago. The setting of this era, called the Late Cretaceous, is radically different from what we know today. The immense continents we see on the modern map were arranged differently, sometimes interrupted by inland seas that spanned enormous distances. On Earth, a multitude of creatures populated the forests, swamps, and vast floodplains. Among them is the Tyrannosaurus rex, or T-Rex, whose presence dominates the end of an exciting chapter in the history of life. To fully understand the context in which this imposing predator evolves, it is essential to delve into the historical and geological details of this period. The Late Cretaceous period extends from about 100 million years ago to 66 million years ago. However, the T-Rex only appears towards the very end of this period, around 68 million years ago. It reigns for about 2 million years, from 68 to 66 million years ago, until a massive extinction event called the Cretaceous-Paleogene boundary abruptly ends the majority of non-avian dinosaurs. This boundary is estimated to be around 66 million years ago. The extinction event has been originally attributed to the impact of an asteroid on the Yucatan Peninsula, Chicxulub site, coupled with intense volcanic activities, such as the lava flows of the Deccan Traps now located in India. One of the striking features of the end of the Cretaceous is this increased volcanic activity. In several regions around the globe, gigantic lava flows slowly cover the surface and continuously release gases into the atmosphere. This situation has a notable effect on the climate, as it helps to change the concentration of carbon dioxide. The average global temperatures are then higher than today, and it is estimated that the difference can range from a few degrees to sometimes more than 10 degrees Celsius in certain areas. Paleoclimatology studies suggest that the average world temperature during the Late Cretaceous could be around 25 degrees Celsius, compared to about 15 degrees Celsius today. This heat encourages the growth of abundant vegetation and instills the planet with an atmosphere conducive to the flourishing of life, both plant and animal. Sea levels rise significantly. Instead of a simple coastline defining the edges of continents, vast inland seas advance deeply into the lands. One of the most famous of these, the Western Interior Seaway, inundates much of present-day North America, forming a maritime corridor that, depending on the periods and oscillations of sea levels, can connect waters from the Gulf of Mexico to the Arctic regions. This arm of the sea sometimes divides North America into two large landmasses. To the west, a part called Laramidia, and to the east, a zone called Appalachia. Laramidia, the narrower western strip, is precisely the area where T-Rexes and many other famous dinosaurs evolve. This division has influenced the distribution of species on the continent. Some dinosaurs, constrained by natural barriers, fail to cross these inland seas and form distinct lineages according to the regions. Alongside oceanic upheavals, vegetation is greatly altered. In the Late Cretaceous, there is a rapid expansion of flowering plants, also known as angiosperms. Before this time, conifers, ferns, and older plant groups dominate landscapes. Angiosperms, by developing new pollination strategies and offering a wide variety of fruits and seeds, transform ecosystems and influence animal diversity. Forests become denser, some reaching considerable heights thanks to the heat and sometimes significant precipitation. There are also many swamps, where tree ferns can rise several meters high. In this lush setting lives a multitude of animals contemporary with the T-Rex. But to precisely determine where to discover them, one must examine the large geological formations that replace these ancient landscapes today. The Hell Creek Formation in Montana, USA, is one of the most iconic sites for finding T-Rex fossils. Other sedimentary layers, like those in the Lance Formation in Wyoming or Judith River Formation in Montana, also testify to an impressive biodiversity at the end of the Cretaceous. Geologists and paleontologists observed the stacking of rocks ranging from fluvial sands and sandstones to finer clay layers, sometimes deposited during successive floods or as a result of variations in the level of the inland sea. These depositional environments, composed of mud and sediments transported by waterways, favor the preservation of animal and plant remains. The carcasses, quickly buried, were able to fossilize over millions of years. These geological formations are not uniform. They can reach tens of meters in thickness, or even more than 100 in places, and each layer often contains valuable clues about past environmental conditions. For instance, analyses of pollen grains trapped in sedimentary layers inform paleobotanists about the dominant type of vegetation at specific times. Fossils of mollusks, crustaceans, or aquatic microorganisms reveal whether the area was submerged by the sea or subjected to a drier climate. By combining all these clues, scientists managed to reconstruct the progressive evolution of the landscape and understand how the T-Rex and its contemporaries are integrated into it. The Western Interior Seaway plays a major role in the distribution and evolution of dinosaurs. Because this maritime corridor sometimes splits North America in two, faunal differences are observed between the east and west of the continent. Some lineages of herbivorous dinosaurs, for example, develop more in the east, while others thrive in the west. The T-Rex is part of the Laramidia fauna, where it coexists with a wide range of herbivorous species it potentially hunts. But having a warm climate and dense forests is not enough to prosper. The presence of sufficiently numerous prey and adequate hunting spaces becomes essential for a predator of this magnitude. The floodplains, frequent in the region, offer fertile areas where herds of herbivores develop, thus providing an abundance of food for the T-Rex. Now let's focus on the coexistence of the T-Rex with other dinosaurs of the same era. Among the herbivores sharing its territory is the Triceratops, recognizable by its 3 thick horns and impressive bony frill. Very common in the Hell Creek and Lance formations, this large ceratopsian can reach lengths ranging from 7 to 9 meters with a weight estimated at several tons. It likely lives in small groups or in areas where other herbivores concentrate, like the Edmontosaurus, a hadrosaurid or duck-billed dinosaur, known for its flattened snout ideal for grazing vegetation. The Edmontosaurus is particularly abundant in these landscapes, attesting to the vast prairies or alluvial forests where it feeds on diverse plants. These herbivores, by their size and number, can represent a challenge for a predator, but they are undoubtedly the main source of food for a carnivore as gigantic as the T-Rex. Other dinosaurs, such as the Ankylosaurus or the Pachycephalosaurus, also coexist with the T-Rex in the Cretaceous landscapes. The Ankylosaurus, famous for its bony armor and club-like mass at the end of its tail, embodies a formidable challenge for any predator wishing to attack it. This low-slung dinosaur, reaching several meters in length, relies on its armor and formidable tail to defend itself. As for the Pachycephalosaurus, equipped with a thick cranial dome, probably used in head-butting fights or dominance contests, it is part of the astonishing variety of dinosaurs with which the T-Rex shares its habitat. This faunal diversity testifies to complex ecosystems and multiple interactions, ranging from competition for food to survival strategies adapted to each species. However, the T-Rex is not the only predator in this environment. Dromaeosaurids, including species like Dakotaraptor, also prowl these areas. Less massive, probably more agile, they could hunt opportunistically or target medium-sized prey. It is believed that these small theropods might also scavenge depending on circumstances. In an environment where resources are sometimes limited, competition is fierce. Each predator develops its own strategy to survive. Some focus on smaller prey, others adopt collective hunting tactics, and still others take advantage of their size to intimidate competitors when sharing a carcass. The T-Rex, with its imposing stature and powerful jaws, likely occupies the position of super predator, but that does not prevent it from facing competition from scavengers and other opportunistic feeders. Imagine an animal sometimes exceeding 12 meters in length, with a height of nearly 4 meters at the hips. Its silhouette is immediately recognizable, an enormous head carried by a muscular trunk, all balanced by a long tail. The Tyrannosaurus rex belongs to the family of theropods, a group of mainly carnivorous dinosaurs. Its weight could easily exceed 8 tons, placing it unquestionably among the largest predators ever to walk the earth. When imagined moving, it is often visualized with its head forward, body slightly inclined, robust hind limbs providing the main support, and the tail acting as a counterbalance to keep the whole in perfect equilibrium. It is sometimes difficult to grasp how such a body mass affects the overall mechanics of the animal. The T-Rex must have had very developed musculature to support its weight. The muscles connecting the pelvis, legs, and tail had to be particularly powerful to ensure its locomotion. A long period of rapid growth, demonstrated by the study of its bone tissues, likely contributed to forging this massive silhouette, distinguishing it from other large Cretaceous carnivores, less imposing and less heavy. This morphology is often described as the quintessence of power at the service of predation, a model of evolution perfectly adapted to its role as a super predator. The skull of the T-Rex is both robust and ingeniously lightened. If one studies its fossilized bones, one notices the presence of large openings called fenestrae. These windows in the bone had several functions. They reduced the total weight of the skull while providing more space for muscles and sensory organs. Behind these openings, powerful masticatory muscles anchored, giving the animal an exceptional bite force. Paleontologists even estimate that the pressure exerted by the jaw of a T-Rex during a bite could exceed 35,000 newtons, a record for a terrestrial animal. In other words, it possessed one of the most formidable bites in the entire history of vertebrates on Earth. Inside this mouth, there are on average between 50 and 60 teeth arranged in several rows, with variations sometimes seen in younger or older individuals. The teeth themselves combine power and efficiency. Their conical and slightly serrated shape allowed them to pierce and shred flesh. They were not perfectly aligned like those of some marine reptiles. Rather, their arrangement created a kind of meat trap, where each jaw strike inflicted large wounds. Wear was common, and observations indicate that these teeth were renewed throughout the animal's life. Contrary to what one might believe, the T-Rex did not grind its prey with lateral movements like some carnivorous mammals. It inflicted powerful bites, tearing off chunks of flesh to swallow. This direct shredding strategy avoided lengthy chewing efforts and optimized calorie retrieval, a crucial point for an animal of this stature. The image of a T-Rex often shows surprisingly short arms relative to the gigantic size of its body. These forelimbs, although reduced in length, were not useless. They were extremely muscular, as evidenced by the muscular attachment sites visible on the fossilized bones. Equipped with 2 fingers ending in claws, these hands seem modest compared to the overall stature, but their potential strength should not be underestimated. Several theories have been proposed regarding their function. Some paleontologists suggest that they might have been used during reproduction, particularly to stabilize the partner or to grasp during mating. Other hypotheses suggest that the forelimbs served as support to help the T-Rex get back up after falling or sliding. This theory implies that despite their apparent disproportion, these arms would have offered an additional anchor point to the ground, facilitating the maneuver of a body weighing several tons. There is also the possibility that they played a role in hunting. The T-Rex might have used these solid claws to hold a wounded prey before finishing it off. However, no fossil evidence allows for any of these proposals to be definitively confirmed. The scientific debate remains open, and paleontologists continue to examine each new clue to better understand the usefulness of these short but powerful arms. Observing the T-Rex's anatomy, one quickly understands that its hind limbs were designed to support an extraordinary body mass. The femoral bone, in particular, was very thick, capable of supporting the body's weight when standing or walking. The tibia, also robust, was articulated in such a way as to efficiently transmit muscular force to the feet. The muscles connected to the pelvis, more specifically, the caudofemoralis muscle, which extends from the tail to the thigh, played an essential role in propulsion. This osseous and muscular system was designed for sudden accelerations rather than marathons. Current estimates of the T-Rex's maximum speed vary, with some scientists suggesting a range between 20 and 30 km/h. This is not an exceptional performance when compared to smaller and more agile animals, but for a massive dinosaur weighing several tons, it was already a major asset. This ability to perform short sprints, combined with the element of surprise, was likely enough to catch and subdue slow or wounded prey. Thus, the T-Rex was not a great endurance runner, but an effective sprinter for its scale. The tail of the T-Rex, sometimes called the caudal tail, is a fundamental part of its biomechanics. Much more than a mere extension of the body, it played a key role in balance and locomotion. Its architecture relies on a long series of robust vertebrae, each equipped with significant muscle attachment points. Among these muscles is once again the famous caudofemoralis, which stretches from the upper part of the tail to the thigh, and whose contraction helps to pull the leg backward. This structure explains how the T-Rex, despite its huge mass, could quickly initiate a running movement or maintain a stable posture when its jaws closed on prey. The tail also provided the indispensable counterbalance to the animal's massive chest and head. Without this support, the T-Rex would risk tipping forward. At rest, the tail probably didn't drag on the ground continuously. The most likely position held it horizontal, in line with the spine. The muscles and tendons of the caudal region prevented any imbalance and allowed rapid adjustments in changes of direction. Thus, when the animal began a rotation to target prey or pivot toward a rival, its tail acted as a rudder, anchoring its center of gravity and preserving overall stability admirably. Popular depictions of the T-Rex, long influenced by early paleontological discoveries, generally show it with rough, scaly skin, similar to that of modern reptiles. Some fossils with skin impressions have indeed revealed scale patterns, confirming that the T-Rex had at least partially a plumage-free skin texture. However, science evolves rapidly, and several discoveries related to other large theropods suggest that the presence of proto-feathers, or filaments, is plausible, particularly in young individuals or on certain areas of the body. It is believed that these potential primitive feathers might have helped in thermoregulation, retaining heat for growing animals, or provided camouflage depending on their color and distribution. To date, no direct feather imprints have been clearly attributed to the adult T-Rex, leading some researchers to consider that a majority of adult individuals were mainly covered in scales. Other, more indirect fossil evidence suggests that sparse down may have been present at certain life stages or on specific regions of the animal, such as the neck or upper back. The scientific challenge is to determine if this iconic dinosaur had inherited these features from the avian lineage, or if it retained the more traditional reptilian appearance. The T-Rex was not merely a brute lacking sensory sophistication. On the contrary, its senses were particularly developed, confirming its status as an apex predator. First, let's focus on its vision. Although the eye sockets were located on the sides of the skull, they were slightly oriented forward, granting the animal a form of binocular vision. This allowed it to judge distances with some precision, a major asset for hunting. Several studies on the arrangement of the eye sockets and the depth of the skull also suggest that the T-Rex enjoyed quite sharp visual acuity, potentially far superior to that of many other herbivorous or even carnivorous dinosaurs. Next, its sense of smell was even more refined. The olfactory bulbs, brain structures associated with smell detection, were abnormally large relative to the size of the cranial cavity. This trait suggests that the T-Rex could detect carcasses over a considerable distance or track the trail of injured animals, even when they were out of sight. This ability, as an opportunistic scavenger, is taken very seriously by the scientific community, as it might explain how such a massive animal regularly found food in an environment that wasn't necessarily teeming with easy prey. Regarding hearing, studies on the inner ear structure of some theropods closely related to the T-Rex suggest it might have been particularly sensitive to low frequencies. This type of sound is typically associated with the movement noises of large animals, vocal growls, and various ground vibrations. For a hunter like the T-Rex, being able to pick up these low-frequency signals sometimes meant locating moving herbivores or detecting peers nearby. Although it is difficult to precisely reconstruct the range of sounds it emitted itself, it can be hypothesized that its vocalizations, if they existed, were deep and powerful, designed to carry over long distances. For a long time, dinosaurs, including the T-Rex, were considered to be gigantic, cold-blooded reptiles, meaning they could not autonomously regulate their body temperature. But contemporary research nuances this view. The bones of T-Rex exhibit growth rings and an internal structure that suggests a higher metabolism than that of modern reptiles. Scientists now refer to a mesothermic state to describe this type of functioning, located between ectothermy, like current reptiles, and endothermy, like birds and mammals. This characteristic meant that the T-Rex was potentially capable of maintaining a body temperature higher than that of its environment, without having the same strict warm control level as a mammal. A rapid growth rate, estimated at several hundred kilograms per year during the most active phases, supports these hypotheses. Evidence is piling up thanks to the study of fossilized blood vessels in bones, which suggest a more developed metabolic intensity. In fact, it is becoming increasingly clear that the T-Rex, despite its reptilian appearance and origins among theropods, was closer to birds in managing body heat. This likely conferred a significant advantage in an environment where competition among large predators could be fierce. This capability of self-regulation, even if only partial, also helped the T-Rex to remain active over a longer time span and in varying climatic conditions. Having a wide range of viable temperatures means being able to hunt in contexts that more strictly ectothermic predators might find uncomfortable. A stable internal temperature promotes better muscle and brain function, essential criteria for a highly specialized hunter. Imagine a landscape where vast, verdant plains stretch as far as the eye can see, flooded by seasonal floods and traversed by winding river meanders. In the Late Cretaceous, about 68 to 66 million years ago, these floodplains were one of Tyrannosaurus rex's preferred environments. Thanks to rivers rich in sediments and shallow basins, these areas were teeming with plants useful for the survival of large herbivores, themselves becoming prime targets for a super predator like the T-Rex. Semi-humid forests, sometimes located on the edge of these plains, represented another favored habitat for the T-Rex. There was dense vegetation, consisting of conifers, tree ferns, and many flowering plants that appeared during the Cretaceous. This plant diversity offered natural hiding spots, ideal for preparing ambushes or simply resting out of sight. Regular precipitation and the proximity of marshy areas created soft soils where dinosaurs could leave deep footprints, sometimes preserved over millions of years. These forests, rich in insects and small vertebrates, also housed many smaller herbivorous dinosaurs, such as small ornithopods or young triceratops, potential prey for an opportunistic predator. The T-Rex, though colossal, took advantage of the landscape's heterogeneity. Paleontological studies conducted in sedimentary formations like Hell Creek show that this carnivore roamed both grass-covered plains and more wooded, humid areas. Access to water was crucial, and it is estimated that the proximity to watercourses or marshes was of vital importance for the survival of an adult individual. Indeed, the presence of carcasses accumulating on the shores or the ease of surprising and herbivore drinking were all meal opportunities. The T-Rex was above all a top predator, equipped with jaws so powerful that its bite force is estimated among the highest of all known land animals. It attacked massive herbivores without fear. Triceratops, measuring up to 9 meters and weighing several tons, still constituted choice prey. Similarly, the Admontosaurus, exceeding 12 meters in length, sometimes found itself trapped by the formidable attack of the T-Rex. Paleontologists have discovered tooth marks on the bones of Triceratops and other herbivorous dinosaurs, bearing the characteristic signature of deep and powerful bites. These marks confirm that the T-Rex consumed a wide variety of dinosaurs. However, the exact mode of capture and the scope of prey remain subjects of debate. Scavenging, in addition to active hunting, seems to have played a role in the diet of this enormous theropod. Studies on the morphology of its olfactory bulbs suggest that it had an exceptionally developed sense of smell. Smaller creatures, or even large herbivores that died of natural causes, could be detected from several kilometers away. Numerous fossil clues indicate this tendency. Carcasses showing T-Rex tooth marks, located on areas usually avoided by predators when hunting, for example more bony or low nutrition parts, reinforce the thesis of food opportunism. It seems that the T-Rex did not disdain an easy meal if the opportunity presented itself. Its diet must also have depended on the age and size of the animal. A young T-Rex, still growing, would not have been able to take down the same prey as a robust adult. The younger ones, being more agile, could target lighter herbivores or track isolated prey in more wooded areas. As they gained muscle and experience, they attacked increasingly larger prey, benefiting from the fear that such a carnivore instilled in the animal kingdom of the Late Cretaceous. To understand the T-Rex's hunting techniques, one must first look at its morphology. With a massive skull and a powerful neck, it was built for frontal attacks and rapid meat tearing. However, it was not a long-distance runner, and most experts agree that the T-Rex relied more on surprise attacks and brief assaults. In floodplains, where the vegetation could be less dense, it was possible for it to approach its prey by taking advantage of terrain dips or low vegetation cover. In semi-humid forests, it could use the darkness and tree trunks for camouflage before launching a swift attack. This ambush strategy relied on precise observations of herbivore behavior. An adult T-Rex, with a brain reasonably developed for a dinosaur and especially excellent olfactory abilities, could wait for the opportune moment. A weakened individual, a young one at the edge of the herd, or an animal distracted by drinking water. The attack then occurred quickly, in a very short time frame, where the power of its jaws and the element of surprise played a decisive role. The muscular hind legs ensured rapid spurts of speed, though short in duration, allowing it to cover the critical few meters before the prey could flee. The question of group hunting in T-Rex remains controversial. Some fossil evidence, including the discovery of multiple T-Rexes in relatively close sites, suggests a possible form of cooperation or mutual tolerance. Conversely, other researchers doubt the idea of a true pack mentality, as giant theropods were often very territorial and aggressive toward one another. It is possible that the T-Rex communicated or interacted in some way around a carcass. But to the point of organizing coordinated strategies, the evidence remains too tenuous. Although the image of the solitary T-Rex is widespread, fossil layers sometimes tell a more nuanced story. Bite marks observed on T-Rex bones clearly indicate intraspecific aggression. Individuals could engage in real battles, potentially to defend a territory, claim a carcass, or establish dominance. The potential presence of a hierarchy in these T-Rex populations is also suggested by some paleontologists. The largest individuals, whose size could exceed 12 meters, might have imposed themselves over the younger or less experienced ones, monopolizing access to fresh carcasses and prime hunting areas. The need to assert themselves to survive, coupled with the size of the prey, left little room for large-scale collaboration. However, this form of hierarchy, strictly based on brute strength, did not exclude the possibility of temporary alliances or mutual tolerance in the face of resource abundance or scarcity. In another regard, it is supposed that visual or vocal signals, which are difficult to recreate in paleontology, might have been part of the social life of the T-Rex. Dinosaurs of this size, likely capable of producing low-frequency sounds, could detect each other from several kilometers away. These vocalizations could have warned potential rivals, attracted a mate, or maintained contact through forests. Of course, reconstructing the language of the T-Rex is largely speculative, but many paleontologists believe that communication played a role, particularly during reproduction periods or while guarding the nest. The question of the T-Rex's speed has sparked a lot of debate. Estimates vary, but most studies agree on a range between 20 and 30 km/h for an adult individual. This figure might seem relatively low for a predator of this size, but it's important to put this performance in the context of its anatomical structure. An animal weighing several tons had to manage extremely high mechanical constraints. Its massive legs, although powerful, were not designed to sustain prolonged running or repeated accelerations over long distances. The T-Rex was more adapted to brief and intense effort. Its powerful musculature at the back of the body allowed it short sprints, especially during an ambush. Once launched, it could quickly cover a few dozen meters, attempting to catch a surprised prey before it could react. Sedimentary formations sometimes preserve fossilized tracks, even though those of the T-Rex are rare, which show deep imprints, highlighting this great ground pressure during strides. Paleontologists also rely on biomechanical simulations performed by computer to assess the impact of weight and musculature on maximum speed. Other specimens exhibit bone pathologies consistent with intense use of the hind limbs, suggesting, however, that an injured or aged T-Rex would see its running abilities greatly reduced, becoming more inclined to scavenging. The parental behavior of a T-Rex remains difficult to assess due to lack of direct evidence. However, comparisons with some smaller theropods, like Troodon, suggest there was at least some form of nest monitoring. Studies on fossil eggs, sometimes found in nests attributed to related dinosaurs, reveal that large theropods could have been protective of their offspring. Of course, the scale is different for a T-Rex, but one can easily imagine the significant stakes that the next generation represented for such an imposing predator. The defense of the nest is another crucial element mentioned by paleontologists. If a T-Rex chose to lay its eggs in a less flood-exposed area, it still needed to keep the location under surveillance. Scavengers, like some smaller carnivorous dinosaurs or even primitive mammals, could covet these nutrient-rich eggs. The presence of an adult near the nest was likely to deter many predators, as a single bite could be fatal. It is also possible that the female T-Rex took on most of this defense, while the male patrolled a larger territory and ensured food supply, or vice versa. The discovery of medullary bone, a specific bone tissue associated with egg-laying in female T-Rex specimens, demonstrates that they were reproductively active, but the exact allocation of parental roles remains highly speculative. Young T-Rex, once hatched, certainly needed an overseen environment to survive their first months, even though their rapid growth quickly made them less vulnerable. Some clues, such as the location of small T-Rex fossils near older groups, suggest that family cohabitation could extend over a certain period. However, this dynamic is not well understood, especially considering the intraspecific aggression observed among adults. In any case, the idea of a T-Rex willing to do anything to protect its offspring reinforces the image of an absolute master of its territory, as fierce as it was attentive when the survival of its descendants was at stake. During the Late Cretaceous, the T-Rex was not the only carnivore. Smaller theropods, like some dromaeosaurids, such as the Dakotaraptor, also roamed the forests and plains in search of prey. Although less imposing, they had other advantages, such as greater agility, or the ability to hunt in packs. Nevertheless, the size and power gap between these predators and an adult T-Rex was often such that they did not exactly compete for the same prey. Dromaeosaurids could focus on medium-sized targets or settle on abandoned carcasses. The T-Rex, on its part, exerted such overwhelming dominance that it could easily displace any other carnivore from a food source. The coexistence with these smaller predators likely resembled a clear food hierarchy. The T-Rex reigned supreme when present, able to eliminate or chase off overly persistent scavengers. However, the relative abundance of prey and the vast expanse of available territories left room for several ecological niches. Smaller species could survive by carefully avoiding crossing paths with an adult T-Rex while taking advantage of its leftovers. Discoveries of overlapping tooth marks on fossil bones occasionally revealed that different carnivores sequentially fed on the same carcass, without necessarily being present at the same time. This sequential use of food resources seems logical in an environment where access to food required dealing with the dominant presence of the T-Rex. The question of whether the T-Rex preferred to hunt during the day or night remains partially open. Direct evidence, such as fossil tracks clearly associated with nocturnal activity, is lacking. However, the study of its skull morphology and the size of its cranial cavities suggest a particularly developed sense of smell, coupled with a possible sensitivity to low-frequency sounds. This data supports the case for mixed activity. During the day, the T-Rex could rely on its imposing silhouette to intimidate its prey, while at night, its keen sense of smell and hearing took over to detect the movements and scent of vulnerable creatures. This adaptive flexibility echoes logically in the late Cretaceous environment. Temperatures could be very high in some regions, perhaps encouraging twilight hunting to avoid the overwhelming heat of the day. Moreover, large herbivores like hadrosaurs or ceratopsians probably moved at times when temperatures were more moderate, thus offering predation opportunities at different hours. The hypothesis of a primarily crepuscular or nocturnal T-Rex also rests on the notion that such a predator, if adapted to ambush, would benefit from a decrease in herbivore vigilance in the darkness. However, without explicit fossil evidence, it is difficult to determine the diurnal or nocturnal proportion of this imposing carnivore. Paleontologists therefore suggest that the T-Rex had a variable and opportunistic activity cycle. Like some current large carnivores capable of hunting at any hour when hunger is felt, the T-Rex seemed to adapt to circumstances, the opportune moment, proximity of prey, and conditions of temperature or light. The beginning of a Tyrannosaurus rex's existence starts with a fascinating yet mysterious element, the egg. Researchers estimate that each egg measured about 30 centimeters in length. This might seem modest when compared to the gigantic size the animal reaches as an adult, but it is already substantial for a carnivorous dinosaur egg. To date, T-Rex egg fossils are extremely rare. Only a few fragments, difficult to attribute with certainty to this specific species, have been uncovered. This rarity is partly explained by preservation conditions. Shells do not conserve as well as bones, and it takes very particular geological circumstances for an egg to fossilize without being destroyed or dispersed by the environment. Based on comparisons with other theropods, that is to say, bipedal carnivorous dinosaurs, paleontologists put forward various hypotheses regarding the shape and texture of these eggs. It is assumed that they could have been elongated rather than strictly spherical, with a slightly porous surface, thereby allowing the necessary gas exchange for the proper development of the embryo. Analyses of shells from other large theropods also suggest the existence of small channels used to regulate internal humidity and temperature. The question of the nest location is equally intriguing. Some specialists propose that female T-Rex could have chosen areas of soft ground, like sandy or muddy banks, in order to ensure good thermal protection and facilitate the partial burial of the eggs. Others estimate that they might have favored areas with dense vegetation, where natural camouflage would protect both the egg and the female during the nesting period. This choice of the laying site would have been crucial for the survival of the future young, who had to face predation or aggression from other opportunistic dinosaurs. While the adult T-Rex was at the top of the food chain, its eggs likely constituted relatively easy prey for various smaller predators. The T-Rex eggs contained embryos that took some time to develop. We're talking several weeks, or even a few months before hatching. Observations made on related dinosaur species indicate that the incubation period could vary considerably depending on ambient temperature and whether the parents monitored the nest, if at all. Although we do not have direct fossil evidence indicating brooding behavior in T-Rex, the period from laying to hatching proves crucial. It lays the foundation for the species' survival by continually renewing populations exposed to the hazards of Upper Cretaceous wildlife. As soon as they hatched, the young T-Rex entered a growth phase that would transform them spectacularly over the years. Studies carried out on sections of fossilized bones, especially growth ring analysis techniques, allow the estimation of the rate at which these animals developed. There is a growth spurt period between 14 and 18 years, during which the animal could gain several hundred kilograms per year. To put it into a concrete context, it would be like an adolescent going through a rapid development stage. Within a few years, it reaches several tons and consolidates an already impressive musculature. This growth spurt naturally requires a significant amount of food resources. Juvenile T-Rex had to therefore gather energy by searching for food or hunting, whether it be small prey suited to their emerging size or, opportunistically, carcasses abandoned by other carnivores. It is also likely that they developed avoidance strategies very early, so as not to engage in direct confrontation with larger individuals, notably other very territorial adult T-Rex. For in nature, competition for food is fierce. In the Upper Cretaceous, the law of the strongest applied without concession, and young T-Rex could encounter various dangers, including from their own kind, for accessing the resources essential to their growth. Morphologically, the hind limbs undergo particularly marked growth, especially in the first part of this adolescence. It is during this period that the robust and powerful bone structure, characteristic of the adult, develops. The femurs and tibias become thicker, muscle attachments thicken, allowing the animal not only to support its own weight, but also to move with a certain speed. Various biomechanical simulations estimate that even a young T-Rex had to reach reasonable running speeds for its mass, sometimes said to be above 20 km/h. These figures remain the subject of scientific debate, but they hint at the phenomenal energy that a growing T-Rex had to expend. When the T-Rex finally reaches adulthood, which is estimated to be around 15 to 20 years, it begins to fully play its role at the top of the food chain. Some adult specimens could exceed 12 meters in length, reach 4 meters at the hip height, and sometimes weigh over 8 tons. At this stage, the animal exerts an undeniable dominance over its territory, hunting large herbivores such as Triceratops or Edmontosaurus. Its status as a super predator would make many present-day carnivorous species pale in comparison. Endowed with a remarkably powerful jaw and massive musculature, it dictates the laws of the ecosystem it thrives in. Sexual maturity occurs around the same period, or even a little earlier for some individuals. In dinosaurs, the key indicator for determining maturity in females is the presence of medullary bones, a bone tissue that forms temporarily to store calcium necessary for eggshell formation. When traces are found on fossils, it indicates that the individual was capable of reproduction at the time of its death. Thus, female T-Rexes could begin laying eggs without necessarily having reached their maximum size. This observation aligns with the reproductive patterns of other large reptiles and current birds, for which growth and reproductive capability are not always perfectly synchronized. The adult T-Rex participates in the regulation of herbivore populations, thereby ensuring a certain balance in the Upper Cretaceous ecosystem. It should be remembered that the immense floodplains and other semi-humid environments of the time housed a remarkably diverse fauna. Without the pressure exerted by super predators, certain herbivorous species could have multiplied excessively and threatened the balance of the local flora, and perhaps even the survival of other animals. The T-Rex, precisely because of its demanding carnivorous diet, contributes to maintaining a manageable number of herbivores. When a large T-Rex specimen is present, other dinosaurs are forced to adopt more cautious behaviors, which influences their movements and habits. This ecological dynamic is observable in most modern biotopes, dominated by one or more top predators. Despite its supremacy, the life of a T-Rex inevitably comes to an end, often around 28 to 30 years, based on estimates from bone growth. Some exceptional individuals may have lived longer, but the conditions of the Upper Cretaceous, characterized by continuous competition, injuries, and diseases, likely reduced the average lifespan. The causes of death are varied. In the wild, intraspecific fights leave sometimes fatal marks: fractures, cranial traumas, internal hemorrhages. Furthermore, a wounded T-Rex may find itself potentially incapable of effectively hunting, which seriously compromises its access to food. Other factors add to this harsh reality. Bone or tissue infections could occur after an injury or impact. Indications of fossilized diseases show pathologies similar to osteomyelitis in some specimens. This means that a simple broken bone could get infected, disrupting the individual's overall health. In an ecosystem where food resources were not limitless, an aging or weakened T-Rex had to face competition from younger, stronger conspecifics, not to mention the fierce resistance of its prey. Food scarcity can be another cause of mortality, especially if environmental upheavals were to occur. Local climatic variations, changes in vegetation, herbivore migrations. If it lacked prey to hunt or carcasses to scavenge, even a dinosaur of this magnitude could succumb to hunger. It is also probable that T-Rexes, like many animals, experienced episodic famine following natural disasters or significant disruptions in the local food chain. To leave us a record of its existence in the form of fossils, a T-Rex needed to have its remains buried quickly enough in sediments after its death. The ideal location could have been a riverbed, where the current and successive mud deposits would gradually cover the body, or the edges of a swamp, where the mud and low oxygen levels would limit decomposition. The primary goal is to prevent oxygen and scavengers from reaching the corpse. In a dry and exposed environment, the carcass disintegrates and disperses more easily, whereas burial in a wet environment greatly increases the chances of long-term preservation. Even when sedimentation conditions are favorable, the fossilization process remains delicate. Soft tissues, such as organs and skin, mostly disintegrate, except in very rare exceptional conditions. The bones harden over time, mineralized by impregnation of mineral matter, and can last for tens of millions of years, depending on the geological stability of the site. The rarity of T-Rex fossils is therefore not surprising. Although they were abundant in their time, multiple factors compromise preservation. Paleontologists must conduct methodical excavations, sometimes digging for months or years to unearth a partial skeleton. The location of large fossil deposits, like some rock formations in North America, is known, but each new specimen represents a major discovery. Moreover, the competition between museums, universities, and private collectors is intense, as owning a complete or partial T-Rex skeleton is a significant scientific and media asset. When a skeleton is discovered, it then undergoes a lengthy preparation process in the laboratory. The bones, often fragile, require progressive consolidation. Special resins are used to stabilize cracks, and sometimes parts are molded to fill gaps or reconstruct missing fragments. Thanks to this meticulous work, researchers can then study the morphology and marks on the bones to deepen the understanding of the animal. Through these multiple analyses, a more precise picture of the T-Rex emerges, not only a colossal predator. The fossil traces reveal that the life of the T-Rex was as perilous as it was fascinating, marked by a cycle in which each generation tried to reproduce before confronting in turn the inherent challenges of that bygone era.